Hello and welcome to the Magic the Gathering Alpha 40 League June 2020 Finals. This is Joel Mick, and the players today, Valerio, Gregori, and I, have each won our respective 6 to 8 person pods and our quarter and semifinal matches, and we are now about to face off for the short-lived glory that is the Alpha 40 League monthly champion. I was tasked with recording the match this month, and I discovered afterwards that my recording had no audio. Because nobody wants to watch a Magic match with no audio and trying to figure out what's going on, I decided to add a little bit of deck tech before the match begins and a voiceover during the game to make sure everyone is clear on the current game state and to discuss some of my thinking and some of the interesting plays. So for this month's league, I decided to play a mono black deck with a moderate amount of land destruction and disruption. In a little bit of experimentation and thought, I've found that although Sinkhole is a great card, especially on turn 1 or 2 or 3, running more than about 6 Sinkholes was actually kind of problematic because a lot of times the opponent would develop enough ability to get some cards on board, and what I really needed in the mid game was more board control rather than simply to destroy one of their lands. So in this build I have actually a Chaos Orb and 3 Icy Manipulators, which also serve as mana denial, but can also be used to eliminate threats or postpone the activity of threats on board. The deck also runs all of the good black cards that you would expect: 3 Hypnotic Specters, 3 Dark Rituals to have the ability to play the Hypnotic Specters on turn 1. I chose to only play 3 Dark Rituals because again, it can be not that great of a draw in multiples. If you wind up using multiples plus a spell, you wind up using 3 cards, and if your opponent counters it, or Swords to Plowshares, your turn 1 send your Vampire, you've just gotten yourself 3 for 1. So I've found 3 to be about the right number. I threw in a Singleton Paralyze to try to deal with some quick starts by my opponent. Things such as my opponent playing a Dark Ritual into a Hypnotic Spectre, or a land Soul Ring, and then a turn 2 Juggernaut, plays like that. Demonic Tutor obviously goes in any black deck if you have one. Frozen Shade is a late game card. Not sure how great it is in this build, but it certainly can be very large and can present a very quick clock to the opponent later in the game. My feeling on the sort of optional cards like Paralyze and Frozen Shade and Drain Life is that it's good to have a mixture of different cards. The last thing you want is to have 3 Paralyzes in your hand later in the game when your opponent has enough mana to pay to untap their creatures. Similarly, the last thing you want is to have only high drops in your hand when your opponent gets out a dangerous creature on turn 1 or turn 2. So anyway, then lastly, a couple Drain Lives. 2 Drain Lives is just about enough to, if played late in the game and maybe using Dark Rituals, is about enough to just kill your opponent outright from 20 with direct damage. So in the event that the game goes long, it gives you some ability to win, even if all of your creatures have been immobilized or destroyed. Similarly, sort of in the mid game, it's a great play against an opponent Juggernaut or a Sengir Vampire once you're up to 5 or 6 black mana. I chose to play only 14 swamps. and one Mox Jet. I chose the Mox Jet over Soul Ring because it's very nice to be able to cast a Sinkhole on the first turn if you happen to have Mox Jet and your opponent happens to be on the play. It works better with cards like Drain Life and Hypnotic Spectre and so forth. I think the combination of 15 mana producing cards out of 40 plus 3 Dark Rituals is just about the right amount. Without the Dark Rituals and with the existence of land destruction in the format, I would probably have gone higher on the land count. Got a couple Juggernauts in here just to fill in the 4-drop slot, and along with the Ices, and on the higher end, one Sengir, one Demonic Hordes, mostly because it's thematic with the land destruction. Honestly, I can't think of hardly any situations in which it wouldn't have been better to just have a second Sengir Vampire, but hey, gotta have a little flourish here as well. So obviously this deck is no longer legal in the Alpha 40 League due to the restriction of Sinkhole to 3 per deck. If I were to run this deck back in the future, I probably would put in 3 Black Knights for the 3 Sinkholes that I needed to take out. That fills in the same 2-drop slot, and it's actually a very good card against Swords to Plowshares. Can really give the control decks and the white decks a lot of trouble. And of course, the Black Knights are a huge beating if your opponent is running Juggernauts and you happen to have 2 of them out there, and your opponent has to just run his Juggernaut into them. So here we go with the action. I've sped things up a little bit just to keep the game moving. Valerio has won the die roll and is going to go first. And of course, this is not what I want to see. With a land destruction deck, Valerio drops an island and a Soul Ring. I at least have a shot here with the Dark Ritual into the Hypnotic Spectre, but of course, Valerio turns out is playing white and has his swords. So there goes my Hypnotic Spectre. I go up to 22, and I draw. And no Sinkholes, unfortunately, out of the 6 in my deck, so I just have to pass the turn. Things are not going well for me. Not really sure what Valerio is on here exactly. Obviously some kind of control deck. Not sure quite what he's got for finishers and how much counter magic and what counter magic and removal he has. So first game is going to be a bit of a discovery for me. This is always bad when your control opponent is just making all their land drops and you're not presenting any threats. And here comes the Icy, which I'm pretty sure he's going to counter, and he thinks a little bit. Obviously has a counter spell in hand. I'm pretty excited here when he decides to let it resolve, but of course, end of turn he disenchants it, so just choosing between the disenchant and the counter magic. And here we go, out comes Serra Angel, leaving up 2 islands, so I put him on a counter spell, that being the most powerful counter magic in Alpha. I have a few different options, including I believe I have a Dark Ritual in my hand, so I could play a Dark Ritual into the Sengir, but I just put it out there figuring if he has a counterspell, he has a counterspell, and it turns out he has a Power Sink, which makes me wish I had played something different, but at least I know for next game that he is running Power Sinks. So on his turn, Valerio hit me with the Serra Angel, which you can't really see since it doesn't tap. And now it's my turn, and I try to sinkhole one of his islands, trying to get him off of counterspell. But there goes another power sink, looks like. And apparently there we go, I do tap my lands, and I pay for the power sink with my Dark Ritual that I wish I'd used last turn to Dark Ritual out my Hypnotic Spectre. I'm hoping here that he's on counter spells mostly, and that I can cut him off of double blue, but we shall see. I've gotten hit by the Sarah Angel again, down to 14, and now that he's got a good threat on board, he's just playing draw go and whacking me for 4 turn, holding up counter magic or swords or whatever. He's got a clutch full of cards there. Hits me again with the Sarah down to 10, and I draw a Hypnotic Spectre, which I'm not expecting is going to do much. And not surprisingly, it doesn't. He swords it, and it doesn't, up to 12, doesn't even give me an extra turn to live. And another hit from the Sarah down to 8. And back to my turn. And a last-ditch effort to get rid of the Sarah and maybe live a little longer, but ran it right into his counter magic. So we're back to Valerio's turn. And Valerio swings with the Sarah Angel again, knocks me down to 4, and looks like I try to drain life a second time, and it's a good thing I did, because this time he Spell Blasts me, so at least I see that he's running Spell Blasts, and that gives me a little bit of an idea how to play for the next games. So, looking at how the game went, obviously him being on the play and having Soul Ring and so forth, there wasn't necessarily that much I could do. But one thing I do notice there is that he played a lot more planes than he did islands. So between that and the fact that I do need to resolve my important spells to win the game, I'm thinking that when I do get my land destruction, I'm going to do the best I can to focus on cutting him off of blue. So turn 1, we each just drop a land, and I believe I'm sitting here with a sinkhole and thinking about sinkholing him, and I think I just decide to wait and hope that he plays an island, which I can then sinkhole. And here I have the extra mana up, so he can't successfully power sink me. So that worked out very well. You have to play some of these things carefully. And drops a Soul Ring again early, not good for me, but at least he does not have blue mana. And I drop the Chaos Orb, hoping that I'll be able to set it off and hit the Soul Ring. And Valerio, unfortunately, has a Disenchant to disenchant in response, and he takes 1 damage from Mana Burn. So now it's going to be hard for me to cut him off of at least quantity of mana, at least until I can land an Icy. He looks like he plays an island and passes, and I sit and think, how am I going to deal with the island without getting whatever I do countered? And it looks like I just play draw go and let him play draw go. Both waiting for something that I'm waiting for some way to maybe cast 2 spells in the same turn so that he can't counter both of them. Although Power Sync is still going to tap all my lands and prevent me from casting a second spell. Anyway, I draw and pass, and Valerio draws and passes. I'm probably waiting for something like a Dark Ritual, so I've got a way to resolve something even if he does have a Power Sync. Oh, here we go. I put a little pressure on sinkholing an island, and I guess he has the ability to Power Sync here for 5, but I have 5, so I could pay it. So I'm able to resolve the sinkhole, get rid of one of the problematic islands. Can't remember what I have in hand here. I have a second sinkhole that I could have cast if he had spell blasted it, and I'm probably just trying to bait him to counter it, but probably turn out to be a mistake to use the disenchant on it if I'm ever able to cut him off with a blue mana. Yeah, I'm just playing it slow here. I know he's got a handful of cards. He lets it resolve, so I tap his Soul Ring during his upkeep. And he taps out to play an Icy, which is a fine play, but I'm certainly very happy that he's tapped out, because it gives me a chance now to attack his mana base more without having to worry about a counterspell. But unfortunately, I don't have another sinkhole, otherwise I certainly would have used it. All I have is Demonic Hordes, which, like I said, turned out not to be a great creature throughout all the games of my Alpha 40 League. It was kind of a win more card if I ever got to the point where I was at 6 mana and could cast it and it was going to live. I was going to win the game anyway, and having to spend 3 mana during upkeep. Pretty painful. But it is a threat that he needs to deal with. I tap his Soul Ring again. So he does only have 4 mana. Alright, he swords it and puts me up to 25. Not really where a control deck wants to be, being this short on mana. Especially running Power Sinks, which can wind up being pretty dead. Now here we go. I tap his island to prevent him from being able to counter my spells. Once I got that Icy on board and got rid of the second island, now I'm in a position to cut him off of most of his counter magic. In fact, even if he were to draw a second island, I could cut him off of counter magic every other turn by trying to tap his island at the end of his turn and then tap his second island at the beginning of my turn. Although he could try to prevent that by tapping my Icy. So here I make a misplay. I'm planning on sinkholing his other island, but I choose to go to combat first, and he lets me go ahead and do it. So on the plus side, I do hit him for 4, But unfortunately, now when I go to second main and I try to tap his island to prevent him from being able to counter my sinkhole, he floats the blue, and so then I can't really sinkhole. And then when I pass, he probably should take one mana burn. He actually uses the mana to tap something of mine to avoid the mana burn, which in retrospect now puts me back in my second main and would allow me to sinkhole him after all. But again, I make a second misplay, and I don't do that. So he does not take the 1 damage from the mana burn. This is us discussing exactly how the timing went there, indicating that at the end of my second main, he used the mana to tap something of mine to avoid the mana burn, and then went to his next turn, which I just let him do rather than sinkholing his island. In any event, rather than mana burning him for 1 every turn, instead I correctly this turn decide to tap his island pre-combat, so that even if he floats the blue and mana burns with it, I can still sinkhole him second main. So he uses the blue while he can to Psionic Blast the vampire, and goes down to 13, and then without his ability to counter anything, I can freely sinkhole his last island, and I play a Frozen Shade. We have a little discussion about how the Frozen Shade works, and he decides to swords it, and I pump it up to 4/5 so that I can gain a 4 life. And so now back to Valerio's turn, and he says draw go. And I slap down another icy, again while he's not able to counter it. It looks like I'm in pretty good shape now to be able to cut him off of blue for the rest of the game with 2 ices in play. And when I say cut him off of blue, I don't mean preventing him from playing, Merfolk or the Pearl Trident or whatever, but preventing him from countering my spells. Okay, Valerio casts a Juggernaut, and I untap, draw. So, as a reminder, Valerio won the first game of the match. And looks like I've now cast a Demonic Tutor, and I'm looking through my library, trying to decide what to take. And what I decide here is that with him at 13, and my having 10 black mana, if I can get up to 15, then I would be able to cast a Drain Life for 13. So between drawing some Dark Rituals, which I haven't seen any of yet this game, and drawing some more swamps, that hopefully I'll get there. And in any case, if I need to just do a big Drain Life on him to get my life total high enough to avoid getting killed by his creatures, that Drain Life would be a good card to have in hand for that reason as well. So that's what I choose to go for. And tap his Soul Ring on his upkeep so he can't use the mana, leaving the other Soul Ring, the other icy available to tap his Juggernaut, and he moves to combat. I tap his Juggernaut, and he passes turn. turn, he taps one of my ices to prevent me from tapping his Soul Ring unless I want to take damage from the Juggernaut, which I do not. So his turn, I tap the Juggernaut before he attacks, and now back to my turn. And he's played an island on his turn, so I tap his island so that I can get rid of it, and he floats the blue in response and taps my other icy so that he would be able to get through with his Juggernaut, but instead, rather than destroying his island, I'm just successfully resolving my third and last icy, which I can then still use to prevent his Juggernaut from attacking. I'm lucky that he doesn't draw a second island and cast a giant brain geyser on himself, because that would be the end of the game for me. Same play here where I tap his island, and then he responds by tapping my icy, and then I sinkhole his island. So, the game is really revolving around what I expected it to revolve around, which is keeping him cut off of blue. I tap his Juggernaut so he can't attack, and now back to my turn. So I'm up to 11 mana, but still not the 15 that I need to cast a lethal drain life. So I pass the turn, and end of turn he taps one of my ices. And during his upkeep, I tap his Soul Ring. And before he moves to combat, I tap his Juggernaut, and he casts a Serra Angel. Nothing I can do about that, but at least I have enough ices here to take care of it if I'm willing to stop tapping his Soul Ring. I cast a Hypnotic Spectre, figuring that maybe I can keep his Serra Angel tapped down and get in for damage, or at least force him to use his icy to tap my Spectre rather than using it to tap one of my ices, which would free up an icy to continue to tap his Soul Ring. So what I do here is I don't tap his Soul Ring so that I can potentially tap his icy and his two creatures, and at the end of his turn, and have an untapped hippie to attack him with. But he has a swords. So there goes that plan, and instead I'm left to just tap his creatures, and at the end of the turn, tap his icy to prevent him from tapping one of my ices at the end of my turn. Up to 12 mana, so only 3 away from lethal drain life. And sadly he disenchants one of my ices. So that's a bit of a problem now, because I can no longer tap both his creatures, given that he can tap my icy on my end step, leaving me, and then untap, leaving me with just one icy. So this turn, of course, I can tap his creatures, but not next turn. And now we're in a little bit of trouble. He's got 3 creatures, and because of his icy, I'm only going to have one active icy. I'll only be able to tap one of them. So it looks like I'm going to be taking 8 damage a turn. I do have a good life cushion at 31, plus I have a drain life in hand. Here I sinkhole one of his planes. No particular reason other than to continue to pressure his mana a little bit. I mean, he does only have 6 mana now after the sinkhole, and he wants to use 1 every turn on the icy. I suspect here that I must have had 2 sinkholes in hand, because I certainly would not have used a sinkhole on a plains in that situation unless I had another, since I really can't afford to use my ices on an island that he might play. Although, of course, if he did play an island, I would be forced to use an icy to tap the island in order to get rid of it. So he has swung and hit me for 8, back down to 23, as I was only able to tap his Juggernaut. So here again, Paralyze is not a great card at this stage of the game, even with all the land destruction that I have, but certainly better to play it than keep it in my hand. I Paralyze his Juggernaut to continue to put some pressure on his mana, and he taps my Icy at the end of my turn and pays the 4 mana to untap his Juggernaut. And so I tap his Juggernaut again. Just might as well tap the one that he's got to pay to untap. Uh-oh. And he's got another island as well, and he hits me for 8. So I go down to 15, and it's my turn. And I draw a land here. I've now got 13 land, so if I could tap the island or get rid of the island and had a Dark Ritual, which I don't, then I could potentially do lethal with the Drain Life, tapping the island on his end step, and then draining him on my turn. So I count down my deck, and I have 9 cards remaining in my deck, and I know that of those 9 cards, 3 of them are Dark Rituals, and one of them is the second Drain Life. Tap his island, and then I sinkhole it, knowing that since I was only going to be able to, was not going to be able to stop all his creatures, I let him go here, and I hope he doesn't drop an island and a Psionic Blast along with the 13 damage that he does from his creatures, because that would be lethal. And I'm just hoping that next turn, if he doesn't play an island, next turn I can draw 1/3 of the time. I'll draw my Dark Ritual, and so then if I were to draw my Dark Ritual here in this spot 1/3 of the time, I'm thinking, okay, I can Dark Ritual and Drain Life for lethal. And now we see here why Valerio won the league last month. In addition to having a good deck, he is a very good player, and to prevent me from doing that, he taps one of my swamps. So now I can no longer Dark Ritual Drain Life for lethal. However, I happily drew my second Drain Life, 1 out of 9, which is even better than drawing one of the Dark Rituals. So initially I'm thinking I'm going to drain him for everything, but turns out that that's only draining him for 10, and then he could swing back for lethal. So as I think about it here, I decide I'm going to leave up 2 swamps so that I can tap a couple of his creatures on his turn. So I've drained him for 8, I go up to 10, and he goes from 13 down to 5, and I have the ability to tap a couple of his creatures here, so he can hit me for 4 down to 6. And while he's thinking, I show him that I have lethal damage with the Drain Life, but anyway, we go ahead. He discards the Spell Blast to hand size, and just in case he has something goofy like Healing Salve in his deck, I Drain Life for everything. So that was an excellent game. I think it was played reasonably well by both players. Prepare for the third and final game of the match. So we have Valerio here on the play, and not what I want to see with an island and a soul ring, although he did verbally complain that he wasn't too happy, and I'm so excited with my hand that has 3 sinkholes in it that I try to sinkhole his island when I only have 1 swamp, but can't do it. So I pass to him, and as advertised, he has a really bad hand with only 1 land, in which I attempt to sinkhole, and he spell blasts, but I really don't care because I still have 2 more sinkholes in hand. And there we go. Now he can't counterspell that, so I get rid of it, and kind of a non-game developing here. I land a Hypnotic Spectre, and with no white mana, or actually no mana at all other than colorless, there's not much he can do but draw and discard. And so here we go, I help him out with the discarding by hitting him with a Spectre, so that he won't have to choose what to discard next turn if he doesn't draw a land. So he discards something at random that I don't really care too much about, and I play another Hypnotic Spectre, and again he misses his land draw, and so I attack him for 4, make him discard 2 cards this time. And this is an example of why it's often not fun to play against sinkhole decks, or land destruction decks in general, is that if you get a little unlucky in your opening draw, you can get really punished. And certainly a reason on the other side of the table to play with land destruction, because you do get some amount of free wins due to it. And so here I go, I have a Demonic Tutor, so I figure I might as well play it. And I'm thinking about what to get. I finally decide to grab a Chaos Orb so that I can blow up his Soul Ring next turn if necessary. And if nothing better. And I swing at him again for 4, making him discard a couple more cards. And I give it some thought, and I think I drew a Dark Ritual here, so now I have the opportunity to Dark Ritual out a Cinder Vampire, or I can play and activate the Chaos Orb, and I decide that it's just not worth taking a chance that I missed the flip, because I'm not that good. So Valerio sees the writing on the wall, not kind of an anticlimactic way here to end the finals, but at least we had 1 really good game in the middle, and it was a pleasure to play Valerio. He's a gentleman, and always has a good attitude and a big smile. And so I hope you enjoyed the video, and hopefully I'll see you again soon.